Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going deep on power. You know, those timeless strategies that everyone uses, from emperors to, well, let's just say clever folks. Our guide is Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, and we've got some juicy excerpts ready to unpack.
What's really fascinating about these laws is that they aren't just stories from the past.
Yeah.
They reveal patterns in human behavior, and these patterns, they're just as relevant now as they were centuries ago.
Okay, so we've got kings and con men and even artists.
Right.
Where do we even start with all of this?
Well, let's start with a law that seems to trip people up even today. Never outshine the master. Greene uses the story of Nicolas Fouquet, Louis XIV's finance minister. So Fouquet builds this incredible palace, throws these wild parties.
Oh, so he's basically trying to outshine the king himself.
Pretty much. And Louis XIV, the Sun King, was not a fan of being outshone.
I bet not.
No. Fouquet ends up imprisoned, palace seized. It's a pretty stark reminder that even if you're talented, making your superiors feel insecure is a recipe for disaster.
So it's not enough to be good at your job.
Right.
You've got to be good at managing the perceptions of those above you. What's the psychology behind this? Why do people in power react so strongly to being outshone?
It often boils down to insecurity and ego.
Mm-hmm.
Those in power want to feel secure. They see someone outshining them as a threat, even if it's unintentional.
So how do you avoid making that mistake? It seems like a thin line between demonstrating your ability and, making your boss feel threatened.
Greene suggests focusing on subtle flattery, making your superiors feel good, acknowledged. It's about understanding their insecurities and finding ways to boost their ego while showcasing your own talents.
Sounds like a game of chess, always thinking a few moves ahead.
Exactly. And that leads us to another law. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
Whoa, hold on. Are we saying betray all your friends and make enemies?
No, not at all. It's more about understanding loyalty and self-interest, how those things can be complicated.
Okay, I'm listening. Is this where the con men come in?
Not yet. First, let's talk about Michael III of the Byzantine Empire. He totally trusted his close friend, Basilius, who you know.
What did Basilius do?
He betrayed and murdered him to become emperor.
Talk about a backstabbing friend. So friends can be dangerous in this game of power.
They can be.
But why would an enemy be any better?
Because a former enemy, once you've won them over, they have more to prove. They're more invested in showing their loyalty. You're much less likely to betray someone who gave you a second chance when nobody else would.
That's a good point. Like, they're more grateful and less likely to take it for granted. How do you even win over an enemy like that without, ending up like Michael III?
Greene gives this great example with Emperor Sung of China. So instead of crushing his rivals, who are powerful generals, he offers them a life of luxury and ease. He takes away their military commands, but in return, they get comfort and pleasure.
So he basically disarmed them with comfort. Clever. It's a far cry from, the typical image of a ruthless emperor. It seems like understanding your opponent's motivations is key here. Knowing what they fear, what drives them.
Precisely. And that understanding is essential when it comes to using deception and smokescreens.
Okay, now we're getting to the con men, right?
We are. Greene tells this story of Yellow Kid Wheel, a notorious con artist. One of his tricks involved a boxing demonstration to distract his mark. A businessman named Sam Giesel, while his buddies messed with the terms of a deal.
So, like a magician's misdirection, drawing your eye to one thing while something else is happening.
Exactly. It's about creating a diversion, obscuring your true intentions. And this principle, it applies way beyond con games.
Really? Give me an example.
Think of Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia. He cultivated this humble, almost unassuming persona. His rivals totally underestimated him. They saw him as harmless, but meanwhile, he was strategically consolidating his power.
It's like the classic underdog story, only he was the one in control the whole time. Makes you wonder how much of what we see in powerful people is genuine and how much is a carefully crafted persona,
That's a question worth pondering. It brings us to the next crucial element of power, reputation. Greene contrasts P.T. Barnum, the master showman, with Coriolanus, a Roman general whose downfall was tied to his bad reputation.
Oh, okay, so Burnham, there's a sucker born every minute guy, wasn't he all about spectacle?
Yeah, he understood that even his deceptions could be part of his appeal. He built a reputation as a showman, someone who entertained the public even as he was, maybe pulling the wool over their eyes a little.
So people were in on the joke, kind of?
In a way. But Coriolanus, he was a skilled general, but he really looked down on the common people. He didn't hide it at all.
So he alienated his support base?
Yes. and that led to his exile from Rome. It's a reminder that even in positions of power, you can't disregard public opinion.
It's not just what you do, but how you're perceived. Perception becomes reality, especially when it comes to power. It makes me think information control is key.
Absolutely. Greene highlights strategic spying, gathering information. He uses the example of Caesar Borgia.
Caesar Borgia, ruthless, right?
That's him, son of Pope Alexander VI. He used a network of spies, to predict his enemies' moves. He can even turn their traps against them.
Do you have a specific example, like how he used information to his advantage?
Yeah. So there was this group of rebellious mercenaries, the condottieri. They thought they had Borgia cornered, ready to capture him. But Borgia knew their plan.
How?
His spies told him everything. So he pretends to fall into their trap. Then, at the last minute, boom, he unleashes his forces, captures the condottieri, crushes the rebel.
What a power move. It really is true. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the better you can anticipate threats, seize opportunities.
Precisely. But sometimes, the strongest move isn't to fight. It's to yield.
Surrender. Isn't that admitting defeat?
Not necessarily. It's about strategic retreat. Greene contrasts the fate of the Melians, who refused to surrender to Athens.
Oh, what happened to them?
They were completely destroyed. But then there's King Goujian of Yu.
Okay, so the Melians were stubborn, and it cost them everything. What about this king, Goujian? How did he use surrender?
After a terrible defeat, Ji surrendered to his enemy, King Fuchai. For years, he endured humiliation, serving as Fuchai's slave. Secretly, though, he was plotting his revenge.
So the classic revenge plot, bide your time, wait for the right moment.
And it worked. When the time was right, he attacked, defeated Fuchai, and got his kingdom back. It shows that knowing when to yield can be a sign of strength, not weakness. Sometimes stepping back lets you come back stronger.
This deep dive is full of twists and turns. It seems like power is less about brute force and more about, well, human nature. Understanding strategy, timing. What else does Greene talk about?
Oh, there's so much more. We've only scratched the surface. Concentration and dispersion, isolation, the dangers of that.
I'm ready to keep digging. This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about power.
That's the beauty of Greene's work. It challenges our assumptions, makes us see the world differently. Let's continue exploring.
We've covered some serious ground already, from outshining the master to the power of surrender. What other fascinating insights does Greene offer?
Well, let's dive into concentration and dispersion. It's about choosing when to focus your forces and when to spread them out.
Okay, so like on a chessboard.
Exactly. Sometimes you got to consolidate, other times you need flexibility.
Yeah.
Think about the Rothschild banking family. They were successful in part because of their focus, their secrecy. They didn't let outsiders in.
Oh, so they kept everything in the family.
Yeah. They centralized information, even developed their own secret code. This helped them control resources, gave them a huge advantage in finance.
Like a dragon guarding its treasure. No wonder they were so powerful. But you mentioned dispersion can be a strategy, too.
Right. Think guerrilla warfare. Greene talks about Mao Zedong and his success in the Chinese Revolution. Instead of bunching his troops together, making them an easy target, Mao dispersed them, used the landscape to his advantage, hit-and-run tactics.
So it's about being adaptable, knowing when to concentrate, when to be more fluid.
Precisely, like playing hide-and-seek on a grand scale.
Yeah.
But isolation, even when it feels protective, has its risks.
Definitely.
Greene gives this interesting example of Pontormo, this brilliant but isolated artist. So talented, but suffered from social anxiety, fear of theft. Led him to isolate himself. He spent 11 years working on these frescoes in a chapel, hardly ever leaving, obsessed with the details.
11 years. That's dedication. But it sounds like it came at a price. What happened to his work?
Well, they're lost now, but accounts say they were chaotic, overwhelming, a jumble of scenes and figures. All that isolation, he focused so much on detail, he lost sight of the big picture. His masterpiece, it became his undoing.
That's a cautionary tale. Even in creative pursuits, too much isolation can make you lose perspective.
Exactly. You need outside input, connection to the world to keep your work grounded, relevant.
And that goes for power dynamics, too. You can feel protected in isolation, but it also leaves you vulnerable.
Absolutely. You lose touch with what's happening, makes it easier for others to move against you. Got to stay connected, keep your finger on the pulse, avoid becoming out of touch, out of power.
Speaking of vulnerability, let's talk about playing to people's fantasies. It seems like a tactic ripe for manipulation.
It can be. But it can also inspire, motivate. Greene tells the story of Marco Bregadino, this charismatic alchemist. He had Venice completely captivated, promised to turn base metals into gold.
Alchemy. It sounds like a recipe for disaster. Was he for real?
No, not at all. But Bragadino, he was a master manipulator. He understood Venetian anxieties, their declining power, their longing for past glory, played on those emotions.
So he was selling them a dream, a way to escape their worries.
Yes, like a magician's illusion, a spectacle to distract from reality.
It's still happening today. Advertising, politics, even relationships, people are always selling fantasies.
You're right. Perfect bodies, ideal lives, quick paths to success. It's a reminder to be discerning, look past the surface.
Question those promises.
Absolutely. And this ties into patience, strategic action. Greene contrasts Henry VIII's impulsiveness with his minister, Thomas Cromwell's calculated approach.
Henry VIII, famous for wanting what he wanted when he wanted it, what did he do this time?
Well, he decided he wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon. He was impatient, forceful, demanded an annulment from the Pope. When the Pope said no, Henry just broke from the Catholic Church entirely.
So his impulsiveness led to what? The English Reformation? That's a pretty big consequence.
It is. But Cromwell, he was different. He knew timing was key. Instead of forcing things, he waited for the right moment, worked behind the scenes.
The long game.
Exactly. He was always thinking ahead, planning his moves. And Cromwell's patience, his timing, paid off. He gained a lot of power and influence.
Like chess. Always thinking several moves ahead.
Exactly. Sometimes the best approach isn't brute force, but careful action, is knowing when to act and when to wait.
Letting circumstances work in your favor.
Right. It makes you wonder how many opportunities we miss just because we're impatient.
We want things to happen on our schedule.
That's a good point. And this leads us to strategic generosity. Might seem counterintuitive, but generosity can be a tool for achieving goals.
Generosity is a power move. I'm listening.
Greene contrasts this woodcutter, totally obsessed with money, with the strategic generosity of Baron James de Rothschild.
Okay, so what happened to this woodcutter?
He was attacked by a tiger. His son was ready to save him, kill the tiger. But the woodcutter, he was more worried about the tiger's skin, how much he could sell it for.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he wouldn't let his son intervene. The tiger killed him, a victim of his own greed.
That's tragic. Clinging to possessions can cost you everything. But what about Rothschild? He was known for his wealth, sure, but also his generosity. Big parties, philanthropy.
It was more than just buying influence. He understood that generosity could build alliances, open doors that money alone couldn't.
So he invested in relationships.
Yes, he used his wealth to build a network, gain access to information and opportunities.
It's like social capital. You're creating goodwill and a sense of obligation.
Exactly. And this takes us to the psychology of power, the Oedipal struggle. Greene uses Alexander the Great and his father, Philip of Macedon.
Okay, the Oedipal struggle. Sounds intense. How does this relate to power?
Greene argues that Alexander's ambition, his conquests, were fueled by a need to be better than his father, to create his own legacy.
To prove himself.
Yes, it's the classic story of the son wanting to outdo the father. And it connects to reinvention.
Okay, so how does that tie in?
Greene says reinvention is crucial to maintaining power. When you become complacent, you're vulnerable. You have to push boundaries, seek new challenges.
Adapt or die, basically. If you don't evolve, someone else will take your place.
That's a good way to put it. And this brings us to the power of symbols and images.
I love this. They're everywhere, but we don't always think about them.
Right. Think about Diane de Poitiers, mistress to King Henri II of France. She cultivated this whole image like a Roman goddess. Youth, beauty, power. It captivated the king, strengthened her position.
Like creating a personal brand.
Exactly. Symbols and images bypass logic. They create emotional connections. It's a powerful tool.
And it's not just historical figures. Think about modern branding. Logos, slogans, they all evoke emotions.
You got it. Companies are using the same tactics as Diane de Poitiers, just in a different context. It's all about storytelling. And speaking of crafting a persona, let's consider Casanova.
The master of seduction. What can we learn from him?
Casanova, he was a master of the courtier's mirror. He reflected back to people their own desires, their values, made them feel seen.
So it was more than just charm.
Right. He tapped into their needs, their fantasies, made them feel special, admired.
It's like a good salesperson or negotiator. They build rapport, understand needs, present solutions.
Exactly. It's a subtle form of influence, but very effective.
Makes you think we should be aware of these tactics so we can see when they're being used on us.
That's so important. Understanding these dynamics can make you a smarter consumer, a better negotiator. It's about empowering yourself.
So you don't get manipulated.
Exactly. And Greene also talked about change, Not doing too much too quickly. He uses the English Reformation as an example.
Right, Henry VIII and his break from the Catholic Church, big changes, lots of conflict.
Yes. Greene's point is that good leaders understand change is necessary, but they introduce it slowly. Respect that people resist disruption.
So you ease people into new ways of thinking.
Yes. Like steering a ship. Gradual adjustment, otherwise you'll capsize. Applies to organizations, relationships, even personal growth.
It's like when companies try to implement change too fast. People resist, they even sabotage the process.
That's right. You need to get people on board, make them part of the process. Sometimes it helps to frame the change as a continuation, not a complete break.
So you're acknowledging the past while moving forward.
Exactly. And this connects to another point. The danger of appearing too perfect.
This is something I struggle with. Shouldn't we always try to be our best?
Of course, but when it comes to power dynamics, it can be a problem. Remember Joe Orton and Kenneth Halliwell?
Yeah, their relationship seemed perfect, but it wasn't.
Right. Orton's success made Halliwell jealous. They didn't address those feelings, and it ended tragically.
So hiding your flaws, pretending, it can actually backfire.
It can. Sometimes revealing your imperfections makes you more relatable, more trustworthy. People want to see the real you.
So it's about being human. We all have strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. And that's really Greene's main point. Power is about understanding human nature. It's not about manipulation. It's about recognizing our motivations, our desires, our fears.
It's about the things that drive us.
Yes. And once you understand that, you can navigate the world more effectively, build better relationships, achieve your goals.
This deep dive has been amazing. It's changed how I think about power. It's not just about dominance, it's about understanding and connecting with others.
That's great to hear. And remember, Greene's book isn't a guide to manipulation. It's about understanding the forces at play, making informed choices.
So we can use this knowledge to build a better world.
That's the goal. Power dynamics are everywhere. And once we understand them, we can be more conscious, more intentional.
More empowered.
Exactly. There's still more to explore, but for now, let's take a break.
So we were talking about how appearing too perfect can actually backfire when it comes to power.
It really can. You know, when someone seems flawless, it kind of makes other people envious, suspicious, even a little resentful.
They might seem unapproachable.
Exactly. Fake even. Or like a threat.
So if you reveal a flaw or two, it makes you more relatable.
More human. People feel comfortable around you then. They're more likely to trust you.
It's like saying, hey, I mess up sometimes, but I'm still capable. It puts everyone on a more even playing field.
And that can be really powerful when you're trying to build relationships, influence people. People are more likely to follow someone they feel connected to, someone they feel is genuine.
This makes me think about social media. Everyone's always showing their highlight reel, the perfect version of themselves.
Yeah, but nobody's perfect. Trying to seem flawless can make you seem fake, untrustworthy even.
So it's about being real, but still, aspirational.
Right. Showing your good side while being honest about your struggles.
Being authentic.
Yes. And that brings us back to understanding human nature.
It's not about tricks or manipulation. It's about realizing that we're all human, with our strengths and weaknesses and all that.
Exactly. And when we understand that, we can understand power dynamics better, navigate them with more empathy, with more skill.
This deep dive has been incredible. I see power totally differently now. It's not just about being in charge. It's about influence, perception, and connecting with people.
And that's what Greene's book is all about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a guide to being manipulative. It's a way to understand the forces that shape how we interact with each other. It's about making better choices.
So we can build better relationships.
Yes.
Achieve our goals.
And make the world a better place.
Well said. This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. I'm going to think about all of this a lot.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, knowledge is only powerful when you actually use it.
That's true. So for our listeners out there, here's a final thought to chew on. If these laws of power are really timeless, who's using them on you right now without you even noticing? And with that, we're wrapping up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning.